The club's role is to be the kind of uncompromising, clear voice for the environment. What's going to protect the planet? What's going to protect public health? What's going to protect the future so there is a future? And as a result, when you're going in to be a lobbyist for the club, you're often the person that's at the table saying, no, it's not good enough to compromise. We have to take a stronger stand, a stronger position.
Kathryn represented the Sierra Club in a very consistent manner, and that was very important for work in Sacramento. So I knew when Kathryn was going to walk through the door that she had an idea of how to help us think about how to get there.
I've always admired Kathryn's ability to have a big perspective, a long-term view, and be right focused on the challenge of the hour.
The one thing that stands out for me about Kathryn and her work is her keen understanding of political nuance. She knew when to be tough, when to listen. She never lost sight of the very big picture of our goals for not only a livable planet, but for an equitable and safe place for everyone.
You can't be fearful. You have to know your stuff. You have to be on top of it, but you also have to be persuasive as well. And I think she taught me the necessity of having all three of those techniques in my advocacy is probably the best way to advocate for the environment ultimately.
My father was in the military until I was 8, and my mother came from a part of Norway that is above the Arctic Circle. It's on an island group above the Arctic Circle. We moved to California when I was about 8. We settled in San Diego. As long as I can remember, when we were kids, our family would go camping. I was growing up during the 60s and 70s. I was very interested in politics. I walked precincts when I was 15 for George McGovern. It's the first of many campaigns for progressive candidates who didn't win. Then I go off to college to UC Berkeley. From there, I did an internship on a newspaper in Alaska and decided I wanted to be a journalist. So I went to Missouri for graduate school in journalism. Most of my career was spent freelancing. Then I wrote a couple of books. But then I wanted to do something related to environmental policy. So I got into UCLA's policy school. One of the people I talked to a lot was a guy named John White. He was the contract lobbyist for about 20 years for Sierra Club California. And I stayed with him working on various policies for about 3 years and then went to work for Environmental Defense Fund. And I stayed with them for about 7 years. I happened to be walking on the street downtown and I ran into Bill McGavern, who was director of Sierra Club California. He said, "Have you heard that I'm leaving?" And I said, "Well, you know, it's funny because I'm starting to look for another job. Do you think I should apply?" When you have 13 different chapters and the National Club, it could get confusing what the Sierra Club's position was. So in 1986, the National Board established Sierra Club California as the entity that would do the regulatory and legislative advocacy for the club so that we would speak with one voice in the capital. And we have a professional staff that's hired to do policy advocacy and organize. When a local chapter is interested in a bill, they go through a process where Sierra Club California evaluates the bill and determines whether or not a position would be consistent with the club's goals. But it's the legislative committee of volunteers that ultimately determine what our position will be on each bill. So it's very volunteer-driven.
We have many issues here in our area in Southern California, and one example is the dire situation at the Salton Sea. Even though it's far removed from Sacramento, Kathryn understood the concerns that we have that really do affect the whole state, and she assigned Brandon to be our eyes, ears, and our voice at statewide agencies involved in work to remedy the situation there and the impacts.
For her, the nexus was always pushing us back to the air quality and the impact on the neighborhoods. The end goal was to get the state to do regulations on requiring public operators to turn over their fleets. When it stalled at the state level, she put energy with her team at the local level to show progress of those policies there. It took a long time for the California Air Resources Board to actually adopt the regulations, and Kathryn was always at the forefront of that.
Senate Bill 1, which was the biggest environmental bill of that year, had to do with kind of protecting California's environmental standards in light of the Trump rollbacks that were happening federally. And Kathryn was just running around the Capitol talking to every single person she could talk to, and I couldn't keep up with her.
One of the great things that Sierra Club California has done in the past and continues to do is an annual report card that looks at how people vote.
One of the representatives was a little bit upset with their score on our annual scorecard, and she really just let them know, like, this is what Sierra Club does, this is where we are. If you don't like it, let's find a place where we can work together, but we're not going to stop holding you accountable.
As director, you're essentially the lead lobbyist, and you're the lead fundraiser, and you're the lead administrator, and you're the lead communicator. So you do everything. You're the traffic cop, you manage the staff. So I spent a lot of time training staff and making sure they were prepared to effectively represent the club.
It was not uncommon to see Kathryn and her team in the building at 11 o'clock at night, at 1 in the morning, because they were working that late to make sure that environmental interests were being protected.
Our staff is a very good young staff that's knowledgeable, that's passionate, that is able to do the work that she taught us in an effective way. And I think that's because she spent time finding out what each of our passions were and our strengths, but also our weaknesses, and then helping us work through those.
Kathryn has been the consummate Sierra Club leader because she knows policy better than almost anyone. She knows politics better than almost anyone. And she knows people who are in positions of power across the movement, inside the organization, and at agencies across the state.
Sierra Club members pay attention and they endorse, and they go out and they walk precincts and they make phone calls, and that can't be underestimated, the value of doing that. And they send good legislators up to the State House, and that makes a difference. There are so many really good legislators in the State House, really decent people who are very smart, who vote the right way, who take barbs from the polluting interests, and they still stand their ground. And that's because the Sierra Club has helped get them to that place and continues to support them.
I think Kathryn is a leader amongst the Enviros, and her retirement is a huge loss to this community in Sacramento. I didn't always agree with her, and I appreciated that we could disagree and still move forward together. And I think for me and for my personal development and my professional development as a Latina in a space that's changing and becoming more diverse, that Kathryn was really helpful to me.
She brought together many different voices and led the way in incorporating environmental justice into our work throughout the state. She built Sierra Club California into an entity that was listened to and quoted many times on the front page of the LA Times. So she really built our organization into a powerful voice for the environment.
Kathryn has always known why we're doing this work, who we're serving, who we're working to help strengthen, whose voices we're working to amplify. And she approaches her work with a kindness. She actually cares about people, and she cares about the solutions that we're trying to implement.
Before she left, she wrote about a 30-page transition document that goes through who I should talk to, when I should talk to them, what I should do for this issue, what I should do for that issue. She still has a footprint in how we do things at Sierra Club California, because for the longest time she was Sierra Club California. And so I want to make sure that I'm still able to keep the reputation that Sierra Club California had under her leadership and move that into the next generation.